What's up, developers? So I've been playing around with Google Jules over the last couple of weeks, which is Google's new AI coding agent that they have here. And I wanted to show you what's helped me get some better output from this AI coding agent. So I put all of my ideas into this checklist here so that they'd be easy to follow. And this is a 4-part checklist, and I'm going to go through all these parts in detail. Um, but for now, the purpose of this checklist is to help improve both the quality of code and the overall experience of working with an AI coding agent, because these coding agents can be really frustrating and go off the rails if they're not set up correctly. And so I'll be doing this demo with Google Jules, and this is what their interface looks like. And I'll be using a Hono REST API. If you're not familiar with Jules, that's okay. It it's Google's AI coding agent, and it runs inside of a virtual machine. It can fix bugs and make features and create a pull request ready to go right inside of GitHub. And if you're not using Jules, that's okay, because these concepts can be applied to any coding agent. I'm going to give you a quick outline of this video so you know exactly what to expect. And like I said, I split this checklist into 4 parts. So the first chapter I'll cover is around the Agents.md file. I'm going to cover what it is, why you want to include one in your repo, and how it helps improve the experience working with an AI agent. And then I'll demo Google Jules and have it create an Agents.md file for me based on this checklist. And then second, looking at this test runner, I'll show you how to set up the bun test runner so that the AI agent can easily run the tests. This is really important because if the AI agent can't run tests, then it has no way to verify that the code it generated is actually working, which means you'll end up with a bunch of AI generated slop. So the third part of this checklist is the environment setup. So I'm going to show you how to do a full environment setup with Google Jules. Jules runs inside of a virtual machine, which is amazing because then you don't need to worry about it messing up your personal computer. But this also means we need to install all of the dependencies and set up the database so that Jules can run your application locally on its own. And then the last part of this checklist is the GitHub Actions. So I'll show you how to create a GitHub action that runs on every pull request. And that way, when the AI agent creates a PR, you'll be able to see right inside of GitHub if these checks have passed or not. And if the checks have not passed, you know right away that changes need to be made. And so that'll save you a lot of time. And then you can respond to Google Jules requesting changes from inside of the pull request inside of GitHub, which is really nice. And last thing, there is a link to the completed code in the description. There is also a link to this checklist in the description. And if you find my content helpful, please subscribe to support the channel. All right, let's jump in. So the first item in my checklist is to create an Agents.md file. So as you can see here in the docs, I'm in the Jules Google documentation right now. Jules will look for this file automatically, looking for a file name Agents.md. And you can describe how to interact with your code base. So why do we even want an Agents.md file? Well, it says right here that Jules will use this file to better understand your code and generate more relevant plans and completions. Basically, this will improve the quality of code. For example, I've had a common problem with AI agents where they're always trying to mock out the database when testing, but I want my tests to interact with the database because it's more realistic. So in the Agents.md file, I'm going to tell it not to mock the database. So that's one example. So here, if I jump back over to my checklist, here's the Agents.md file checklist that I created. I can walk you through what we have going on. So the things to include would be the main technologies frameworks. For me, I have a Hono REST API. I'm using a Postgres database. Give it the folder structure so it understands where you want things placed. And then the second item here is how to set up the dev environment. So you want the AI agent to be able to run your app locally inside its own little virtual machine, so it can confirm that the app starts up and is working as expected. And then you can add some preferences. So these are my personal preferences. I prefer using a functional programming paradigm. So what that means is JavaScript is object oriented, and by manipulating objects, you end up with side effects, which is usually a negative thing. It causes difficult debugging and problems. So I want functional design where there's an input out, data in, data out. Keep things simple. It's easier to test. And then I also prefer keeping files smaller, try to limit it to 125 lines of code. If it gets longer than that, I want to refactor. I don't want it installing new packages. AI also has a bad habit of trying to install a bunch of new packages, so let's tell it not to do that. And then before it creates a pull request, I want it to run the linter formatter and type checker, the TypeScript type checker. And then when it comes to testing, like I'd mentioned, don't mock the database, include both end-to-end and unit tests, and write tests for all application code. So there's a lot in there. And if I come over here to Google Jules, writing all of that out would be quite a bit. I did create a prompt that I am going to put in here, and I'm actually going to have Jules create the Agents.md file for me. So I'll quickly walk you through the prompt, but this is basically the same as my checklist. So I just list out the main technologies and frameworks: Hono, TypeScript, Postgres. I tell it to list the folder structure for me, list how to set up the dev environment, use functional programming like I mentioned, and then for testing, use the bun test runner, bun run test, etc. So basically, I took that checklist, added a few more details, and turned it into a prompt. And I am telling Jules to create this agents.md file for me. So I'm going to give this a go and just show you how Jules works. Okay, so it created the agents.md file. It gives me the option to publish this pull request. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And this is a very simple request. So it's just created that file for us. And then I'll be able to jump over to GitHub here in a moment. All right, so it says success. And then here we have this. And did it create the pull request or just the branch? Okay, yes, it did create the pull request. So create agents.md, and we can see it was created by Google Jules. It says you can respond to it with feedback, and it will then take that and start making edits or changes for you. So if we come over here to the files changed, then I can actually read through the agents.md file that it created and see what we have. So it's got the projects, listing out the technologies. So REST API with Hono and TypeScript and Bun, Drizzle ORM. So that's all good. And Postgres database. So that's the full tech stack. And the folder structure, source with database, routes, library, test, end to end, and unit. Okay, so there's actually an error there. So I have the code ready to go. I prefer my tests to be adjacent to the file. So here I have a queries test and my queries file. So it's wrong about this, and I'll tell it to fix that in 1 second. Getting started. So it says bun install, set up the database. So we need to copy the env, run the migrations. That is all correct. Adhere to functional programming principles. Should be pure, do one thing, and be easily testable. Avoid side effects. Yes, I love that. That's great. Dependency management. Avoid installing additional packages. Great. That's what I want. code quality, yep, run our linter formatter and type checker. Perfect. And file size, just like I said, and use the bun test runner, bun run test for all testing. Okay. And database testing, do not mock the database. All right, perfect. So the only issue here is it's trying to say, hey, test/unit test end to end. That's not how I want things. So, and that's not how they're set up. We can add a comment here, and I can say, this is incorrect. Test file should be adjacent to the application file it's testing. Okay, start a review. And then we can click the submit review button and request changes and submit the review. And it's pretty cool. So we were able to do all of that right here inside of GitHub. I didn't even really need to open up my code editor and make any changes, and it created this file. And then if we give it a minute, it will then create these changes for us. So if I go back over here, and I may need to click the refresh button. There it is. I have received the PR comments and I'm processing them. So it got the note from GitHub, and it's now working on making the fixes. Okay, so it looks like it made the changes I requested, but it wasn't still not completely accurate. So that's how it goes with AI sometimes. Unit tests, it said co-located with the application code. So in the same folder, which that's what I want. But then for the end-to-end tests, it's still saying put those in a separate test directory. So, okay, that's that's fine that it put that there. But what I can do is pull this branch down and then make those small changes myself too. So what I want to do is jump back over to my editor and say, yeah, there we go. I can pull that. Okay, and now I can look at the Agents.md file right here inside of my editor, and I can fix this manually because it's small and it's easier to just fix it myself than it is to prompt this thing. So get rid of this, and then keep that, keep all of that. Required, yes. Test organization, and I'm going to delete this. Unit tests and end-to-end tests should be co-located with the application code they are testing. All right, perfect. That's how I want it, and now I can push up my change. Testing wording. All right, make sure. Perfect. So my updates went through, everything's looking good. And then I can go ahead and I can merge this bad boy. Or once my PR checklist processes this GitHub action. But that covers it for the Agents.md file. The second checklist item that I have to help improve these AI agents and make them more effective is to have your test runner set up inside of the AI's virtual machine. So if the AI can't run tests to verify the code it's generating, then it's almost certainly going to be generating AI slop. So in order for Jules to run my test suite, it needs a .env test file, and Bun will pick up that .env test file and use it when running tests. And then I also need a Postgres database up and running alongside with some logic to create a test database and then reset the test database in between tests and then tear down that test database after all of the tests have run. And then what I've found is that having a few working end-to-end and unit tests to establish the pattern is extremely helpful, because AI, if there's no pattern, it will go create its own pattern, and I've just found it will go off the rails and just mock out a bunch of logic, and to the point where it's sometimes not even testing anything. There's so much functionality mocked out. And then finally, give the AI a script to run your tests. So I can show you what my setup looks like here. So I have a .env.test file, and this is pushed up to my GitHub repo. So when the AI clones my repo into its virtual machine, it will have access to this file. It'll be all ready and set up, just ready to go. So then I also have a couple of scripts here. So I have a create test database script. And what this does is it uses an admin connection to then create a test database. So we have this test database, which is username and password. And then the admin connection will create the database, and then it will run migrations. So I have logic to get all of that set up so the AI doesn't need to worry about running migrations and getting the database up. And then I have some destroy test database logic here, this script. It will look for a database with the name of test, and then it will drop it. So nothing too crazy there, pretty straightforward. And then if I jump over to my package.json file, this is where you can see the create test database script and destroy test database scripts are set up here to be run. And then here's the glue that brings it all together is this test function that I put together. So it will run create test database, and then once the test database is ready, it will run bun test, which will run all of the test files here in the repo. And then at the end, we have the bun run destroy test database. So every time the tests are run, a new test database is created, the tests are run, and the test database is destroyed. That way, the AI can quickly run the tests over and over again without having to worry about side effects or pre-existing data from a previous test run. It's always going to have a fresh environment to work with. And so because this is all set up, all it needs to do is run this one test command and everything is ready to go for it. So that's all for this part of the checklist. The next thing I'm going to do is show you how to actually set up Postgres, the database inside of the Jules virtual machine, so that it can actually run this script and have it work. So in this chapter, I'm going to cover the environment setup for Google Jules. So we need to provide the agent with all of the necessary dependencies so it could run the app locally and run all of the tests. So here, the first thing is I need a bun install. So it'll install everything that's required from the package JSON. And then we want to copy over the .env example as a .env so that it can use that to run things locally. And then we need to install Postgres and create an admin user that can create databases. Specifically, it'll create the test database, and then it'll tear down the test database, so it needs that. Run migrations and seed the database for local development, and then finally run tests. So if I come over here to the Jules documentation on the environment setup section, so it says Jules lives in a short-lived virtual machine. It will clone your repository, install dependencies, and run tests, or it allows it to do that. For simple environments, you don't need to do anything, but for more complex environments, you can provide a setup script. So this is going to be more complex because I need to install the Postgres database and set that up. And that's going to take a couple different shell commands. Um, but before jumping into that, we can take a look at what's pre-installed. So Bun and Node are already on there, and I'm using Bun, so that's great. I don't have to install Bun into the virtual machine; it's already ready for me. But there is no Postgres database already installed in the virtual machine, so that's why I need a setup script to install that myself. So if we come down here to add a setup script, this section, they have this example of npm install, npm run test, and basically we would come over here and click on the repo, and then there is this environment button here. And right inside of here is where we can put our setup script. So what I want to do is create a multi-step setup script in my repo. And the way I can do that is with Bun Shell. So if you haven't used Bun Shell before, it's pretty cool. The use case is basically what we have right now. So I need to run several different terminal commands um, in sequence, and I want it to be saved into my repo in a nice, convenient, version-controlled file. And so that's what Bun Shell can do for us. And it's cross-platform, so it'll work on Windows or Mac or Linux, which is really handy. So if we jump back over here to my repo, I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call it Jules Setup.ts, just in the root of the project. And in order to use the Bun shell, we need to import the $sign from Bun. And now we can start running terminal commands. So the first thing that I want to do is install the dependencies. So remember, this script will run inside of a Google Jules virtual machine. So that's what you have to think about while writing this. So this repo, just imagine, was just cloned into a virtual machine, and we have the code, we have Bun ready to go, and now we want to run Bun install. So that's going to get all of our dependencies from our package.json. So Hono, TypeScript, BetterAuth, all these things will then be installed with this command. And saying no top level await is allowed, and normally that would be true, but here in this shell script, we can do this, and so we're just going to ignore this. TS no check. Okay, so now we've installed our dependencies, and the next thing we want to do is provide a .env file for it. So this .env file is not pushed up to GitHub for security reasons. So we need to copy the .env example as a .env. And this example will have everything it needs for local development. So the way to do that would be await $sign, and then we can say copy the .env example to .env. And that'll do it for us. So the virtual machine will then have the environment variables that it needs. And then the next thing I want to do is install Postgres. So the virtual machine is running Linux, so we'll need to do sudo apt install PostgreSQL. And See, not too bad. And then the next thing we need to do after we installed it, we need to actually start the service. We need to start the Postgres server. And to do that, we can say sudo service SQL start. All right, so now our Postgres server has started. And now we need to create a user. We can do create role / with the name of user. And the reason why I'm doing name of user is because in my test database here, you can see where's my URL? I create a database where there's a user named user with password of password for the test database. So I'm creating that user with the name of user and a password of password here. So it'll be able to access that test database once created. Okay, so then I want to give it with login password of password. All right, and end the SQL statement right there. So let's just double check this. Sudo Postgres BSQL create role user with login password of password. Okay, that's looking good. So now that we have this user, we want to create a database called to-dos. And that to-dos database will be for local development. So if I were to show you this here, so if I were to start this app locally, it's going to look for the to-dos database and try and sign in user and password. So our local development database is a little bit different than our test database, which is totally fine. That doesn't affect anything, but we need to create that database so it has something to connect to. And we can do that with create database called to-dos, and the owner will then be the user. There we go. And the statement. And here, why don't I shrink that so we can see everything a little bit better. Okay, so we've now created the user, created the database, and we actually also need to increase the privileges of the user. So right now, if we run this test script, it'll try and create the test database, but the user doesn't have the permissions to create that. So we need to give this guy the permissions. We can do that with alter role of user with create DB. All right, so we're running that SQL command, alter role user with create DB. That's not what I wanted. Okay. All right, so now that we have the user, we created the database, we can run migrations. So this way, Jules would be able to work with this database locally and actually do like bun run dev and spin the database up So bun run database migrate. So I'll have it run that command, and that command exists in the package.json. So that is bun run database migrate. It'll run that for us. So you can run, these Linux commands that are communicating with Postgres through the terminal, but we can also run our scripts from inside of our package.json, which is great. So we can do a lot here. And then we can run our seed script, which also exists in the package.json. And then we can wrap this up with running the tests. So hoofda, that's quite a lot there for a setup script, which this is why we did it in a setup file, because trying to enter all of this right here into this little box is not great practice. This way we can save our script to version control and it's way easier to work with. So let's go ahead and push this bad boy up. And I push straight to main, which is bad practice, but this is a demo, so it's not a production app. So I'm gonna let it slide. I promise I'm not that bad at work. And so here, let's go take a look at the code, make sure. All right, there's my Jules setup script. It's in there. And then I can say bun run. And yeah, I can just run that file, Jules setup ts. There we go. Okay, so then that will grab that setup script and it will run it when we do this run and create snapshot. So let's give this a go and show you what it actually looks like. So I had just run into an error and I had forgotten a line of code. So I went ahead and I was testing this out behind the scenes. So I was missing this line of code here, 7 sudo apt update. This updates the package cache in Linux environments, and it needed that in order to install and set up Postgres correctly. So I had added this line of code to the setup script, and then I came back over here and I reran it, and then it was successful. So we can see here, I'll just kind of scroll through it quickly, that it went through and here we can see it created the role, created the database, and then it ran the migrations, and then migrations applied, that it seeded the database, and then it ran the tests, and we can see bun run create test database, test, and destroy database, that script. So test database was created, migration successful, and then it passed all of these in the test database, which is awesome, 10 passed. And then it finally destroyed the test database and is exporting the environment state. So now I have this fully prepared, ready to go environment state that my AI agent can now use. So if I come back over here to overview, and let's say I'm going to create a new session, and I'm going to ask it something very basic. So um, okay, so now we can see our snapshot in work. I'm going to ask it just to make more tests because the test coverage isn't complete there. And if I create the plan, we'll see here it is loading the snapshot. So that's the snapshot we just created. That fully ready to go environment is now being loaded. So it's going to have a much easier time um, creating features and, of course, writing tests, because it actually now has a Postgres database that it can work with and a working test script that we just witnessed. So um, that is all for this chapter. In the next one, I'm going to show you my GitHub Actions setup and how that helps to improve the experience of working with these AI agents. So the last part of my checklist here is GitHub Actions, and this is basically gives us an easy way to verify that the agent's work was correct, or at least part of it was correct. So we can check a few different things inside of a GitHub action. We can run our production build, make sure that runs without breaking, run some TypeScript type checking, make sure no bad types were left. We can lint the code, we can format, and we can run the tests and make sure all of that is working correctly. So now I have an example for you. So I let this guy run and I gave it some feedback and kind of went back and forth with it for a little bit. And we can see it ran the tests here inside of its thread, which is really cool. So I can even pop this open and I can see all of the tests are passing. So that's really handy. So you might be thinking, well, why do we need to run the tests inside of a GitHub action if Google Jules can run the tests here? Well, AI doesn't always listen to us, right? So we may tell it in the Agents.md file that it needs to write tests every time, but that doesn't mean it's actually going to do it. And here I have a great example. So this is the pull request that I opened up. I told it to write some tests on the to-dos route, and it went ahead and to-dos routes test.ts, and I can see that it wrote a bunch of tests, which is great. That's not really the focus here, so I'm going to skip over that and come back over to the actual GitHub Actions. So here we can see my GitHub Actions ran, and if I click on this, there's, of course, the big scary red X. So we know something didn't go as planned, and the formatter was neglected, our poor formatter. So the AI bot did not run formatting on the code. So right away I know, okay, cool, I got to fix this issue. No biggie. But basically, this is a good demo of the value of this GitHub action. So here I already have the GitHub action set up and I'm going to walk you through it, but we can see the steps as it goes through, and it installs Bun, installs the dependencies, sets up Postgres, does the production build, the type checking, the linting, formatting, and running the tests, just like in the checklist. And so what this actually looks like inside of our GitHub action workflow, here I can close this down, close that. I just created this. I called it the PR checklist because it's checking PRs for AI agents and making sure that it's doing the basics. Um, so this GitHub action, it's not too complex. Really, it uses just a basic Ubuntu latest uh, runner. It's a GitHub action runner. And so then it will check out my application code. It will install Bun and then install the dependencies for the project. And then Postgres is already installed on the GitHub Action Ubuntu latest runner. So I don't need to install Postgres. I just need to start it. So we can start the service, and then I can create the user similar to what we did with the Jules setup script. So we're going to create role user with login password and give it the database credential there. And then I'm going to run the production build, make sure that works, do the type check, bun run lint, bun run check formatter, and bun run test. And so these various scripts can all be found in the package JSON, where I set them all up. So if I open this, here I can show you, here's the type checker script, the test script, the lint script, the format, and format check. So the difference between these two is the format will actually format the code and change it, whereas the checker will just throw an error if it wasn't formatted. So um, basically that wraps it up here for this chapter. Um, the landscape of AI tools is changing quickly, so I just wanted to show you what's been working for me, what's helping me get better output from these AI tools. Hopefully this helps you. So happy coding and Godspeed.